5-year-old Miguel Angel Correa Diaz is also known as Reaper. For good reason, say officials. He gave the go-ahead for across the Northeast as the MS-13 gang's regional director.
The FBI's 10 most wanted has been arrested in Mexico. Francisco Roman Bardales, believed to be a senior leader of the violent MS-13 gang. Officials say he was positively identified in the state of Veracruz, taken into custody, and be transferred to Mexico City before being deported to the U.S.
A high-ranking leader of MS-13 is finally behind bars tonight. Cesar Humberto Lopez Larios was arrested at Houston's Bush Airport on Sunday. He had allegedly been an MS-13 leader for 2 decades and was an original member of the gang's 12 Apostles of the Devil.
The extradition of Moises Humberto Rivera Luna, alias Viejo Santos, leader of the MS-13 gang, to the United States was completed on March 4, 2025, after President Donald Trump designated MS-13 as a terrorist organization in January of this year.
Was arrested on June 7th during a traffic stop on the Ohio Turnpike. He was indicted 2 weeks later by the government, accused of trafficking drugs and ordering multiple on Long Island.
The Justice Department now moving to drop charges against the man accused of being a top 3 MS-13 gang leader living here in Northern Virginia. This was someone described as taking part in violent gang activity.
Prosecutors say Sainez is the leader of MS-13. Prosecutors say he's responsible for ordering and approving the of 8 people, 3 attempted murders and other crimes. The prosecution says most of his victims were innocent.
The FBI's 10 most wanted has been arrested in Mexico. Francisco Roman Bardales, believed to be a senior leader of the violent MS-13 gang. Officials say he was positively identified in the state of Veracruz, taken into custody, and be transferred to Mexico City before being deported to the U.S.
MS-13 Mara Salvatrucha formed in 1980s Los Angeles among Salvadoran refugees fleeing civil wars. What began as neighborhood protection quickly hardened into street-level extortion, drug sales, and brutal enforcement. In the 1990s, large-scale U.S. deportations pushed thousands of members back to Central America, where the gang fused with prison culture and rebuilt around semi-autonomous cliques. That two-way pipeline, prisons to streets, Central America to the U.S., turned MS-13 into a transnational enterprise. Decentralized enough to survive arrests, connected enough to move money, weapons, and orders across borders. Today, authorities describe a footprint that spans El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico, with entrenched U.S. hubs in Los Angeles, the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia corridor, New York City to Long Island, and other metro areas. The network has also surfaced in parts of Europe, most notably Spain, Madrid, and surrounding communities, where police have tied MS-13 style cliques to stabbings, extortion, and youth recruitment. At the top, senior figures often grouped under the Ramfla Nacional coordinate from inside prisons or while abroad, while local cliques tax businesses, enforce discipline, and execute green light orders against rivals and suspected informants.
At Torre Tribunales, it was reported today that the public prosecutor requested that Angel Gabriel Marroquin Reyes, alias White or Blanco, one of the leaders of the Mara Salvatrucha, be sentenced to 124 years in prison.
The inmate Angel Gabriel Reyes Marroquin, alias Blanco or White, was tried in the high-risk Court E for
Angel Gabriel Reyes Marroquin, known as Blanco, rose to prominence as a local MS-13 shot caller around Guatemala City, widely tied by police to the Locos Centrales clique. Authorities portrayed him as a ruthlessly effective organizer who coordinated extortion, armed rescue operations, and targeted deletions on the capital's outskirts. At the time of his capture, investigators publicly associated him with scores of homicides, reporting he was linked to as many as 287 deletions based on prior prosecutorial allegations. His notoriety spiked after the August 16, 2017 assault on Guatemala City's Roosevelt Hospital, when an MS-13 commando team opened fire during a medical visit to free imprisoned gang member Anderson Daniel Cabrera Cifuentes. The 5-minute gun battle left 7 people dead and about a dozen wounded, including hospital staff and prison guards, triggering a national debate over inmate medical transfer security. Cabrera escaped amid the chaos, and reporting at the time attributed planning or direction of the attack to figures in Blanco's orbit. Blanco's reputation was amplified by an earlier escape. In 2014, he slipped out of a high-security prison during a medical appointment, allegedly aided by outside accomplices on motorcycles. Police finally arrested him in October 2017 at a residence in Chimaltenango, west of the capital, describing him as one of the country's most feared MS-13 figures, with previous detentions in El Salvador before his transfer back to Guatemalan custody. On May 6, 2021, Guatemala's high-risk court, sentenced Reyes Marroquin to 123 years in prison on counts including illicit association, extortion-related obstruction of transit, triple deletion, and attempted deletion charges tied to deletions carried out by the clique he led.
DA Madeline Singa says what started as a routine drug investigation mushroomed into a 22-agency takedown of the East Coast's highest-ranking MS-13 leader. Wiretaps of gang conference calls revealed Diaz gave orders on who and how to by his alleged underlings, 16-year-old Angel Solar of Freeport, who was lured into the woods. Diaz is the alleged kingpin of more than a dozen gang members rounded up in January. Long Island at the epicenter of the crackdown. Officials say he's in the country illegally after being deported once before and was extradited from Maryland, his base of operations.
Miguel Angel Correa Diaz, known as Reaper, emerged as the East Coast shot caller for MS-13 sailors Locos Salvatruchas West Side clique, directing violence and money flows between the D.C., Maryland-Virginia corridor, New Jersey, and leadership in El Salvador. Prosecutors said that from 2015 to 2018 he and co-defendant Junior No Alvarado Requeno ran the sailors as a criminal enterprise extorting immigrant-run businesses in and around Langley Park for rent, trafficking drugs and laundering proceeds through structured payments sent back to gang leadership. He also enforced discipline through green light orders to delete suspected informants or rivals. Evidence at trial tied Correa Diaz to hallmark acts of brutality the clique used to project fear and control. In June 2016, sailors members lured a teenager to a park in Gaithersburg and ambushed him, stabbing him 153 times. In March 2017, after a dispute near Lynchburg, Virginia, a crew dispatched by the sailors kidnapped a high school student from his front yard and mutilated the body. Prosecutors also detailed the killing of a 14-year-old sailor's recruit suspected of cooperating with authorities, as well as routine taxing of local businesses and money drops that kept the clique funded and connected to decision-makers abroad. A federal jury convicted Correa Diaz in November 2021 on racketeering conspiracy and related counts tied to multiple deletions. On April 1, 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison. Investigators from federal and local agencies built the case by tracing extortion payments, phones, and clique communications, portraying Correa Diaz as the operational link between street-level violence in the Mid-Atlantic and the gang's Transnational command.
One of the FBI's most wanted fugitives is in custody this morning. Francisco Javier Roman Bardales was turned over to U.S. authorities in San Diego after being arrested in Mexico. Allegedly a high-ranking leader of the M-13 criminal organization accused of taking part in drug trafficking, kidnappings, and other illegal activities.
Francisco Javier Roman Bardales is described by U.S. prosecutors as a key senior MS-13 leader known in some circles as Veterano de Tribus, who helped direct violence, extortion, and drug distribution across El Salvador, Mexico, and the United States while relaying orders to local cliques and moving money back to top leadership. A New York federal indictment charges him with racketeering conspiracy, conspiracy to provide and conceal material support to terrorists, narco-terrorism conspiracy, and alien smuggling conspiracy offenses that could carry up to life in prison if he's convicted. After nearly 3 years as a fugitive and placement on the FBI's 10 most wanted list in early 2025, Mexican authorities arrested him along the Teocelo-Baxla corridor in Veracruz on March 17, 2025, expelled him to U.S. custody at the San Isidro port of entry the next day, and he was arraigned in Central Islip, New York, on March 19, where he was ordered held without bail pending trial. He has pleaded not guilty and remains presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty.
A few hours ago, we learned that the accused leader of the vicious MS-13 gang is behind bars now, waiting for his arraignment. The U.S. Attorney's Office says Cesar Humberto Lopez Larios, who also goes by Grenes de Stoners and also de Stoners, was arrested earlier this week at Bush Intercontinental Airport. Right now, he is facing charges of conspiracy to provide and conceal material support to terrorists and several other terrorism and narco-terrorism charges.
Cesar Humberto Lopez Larios, known as El Grenas, or Oso, is widely described by U.S. and Salvadoran authorities as one of MS-13's highest-level strategists. Part of the gang's National leadership that set strategy, enforced discipline, moved money and weapons, and coordinated violence across El Salvador, Mexico, and U.S. hubs. A New York grand jury charged him in 2021 with terrorism-related conspiracies and racketeering, including providing and concealing material support to terrorists, terrorism transcending national boundaries, financing terrorism, narco-terrorism, and RICO. Investigators allege he helped organize military-style training, directed extortion and drug networks, and served as a bridge between prison-based leadership and street cliques, Ranfla and Los Pinos, and Ranfla and Los Cayos. After years as a fugitive, he was taken into U.S. custody in 2024 and transferred to New York on the terrorism indictment. In early 2025, U.S. prosecutors moved to dismiss the case without prejudice, and he was returned to El Salvador, where he is held in a high-security facility and faces domestic charges under Salvadoran law. The U.S. dismissal keeps the door open to future prosecution depending on outcomes abroad and policy considerations. Born in Santa Ana in 1978 and long associated with the Stoners Locos clique, Lopez Larios has been linked in public filings to prior arrests for deletion and extortion and to periods in custody that, according to authorities, did not diminish his influence inside the organization.
This designation, marking a key change in the classification of this gang, allowed U.S. authorities to formally request the extradition of its main leaders, including Rivera Luna, who was arrested in Guatemala in 2022. Viejo Santos, who had been released in El Salvador after serving a 25-year sentence for aggravated, continued to wield significant power over MS-13 operations both in El Salvador and in Guatemala and the United States. The Normandia Locos clique, which he founded, continues to be one of the most active factions of the criminal organization, with a notable presence in various departments of Guatemala, such as Chimaltenango, Zacatepeques, and Mixco. The handover of Rivera Luna to U.S. authorities is part of a series of bilateral efforts, where Guatemalan authorities maintain close cooperation with the United States to dismantle the power structures of MS-13.
Moises Humberto Rivera Luna, known as Santos or Viejo Santos, is described by U.S. prosecutors as a longtime MS-13 power broker who continued directing clique activity even while imprisoned in El Salvador. According to court filings, he allegedly used contraband phones to relay orders to MS-13 cells in the Washington, D.C. region, coordinating extortion, drug distribution, and targeted violence, including a plan to unify local cliques and greenlight suspected informants. Originally indicted in 2013 on racketeering and deletion-related counts, he fled Central America after periods in custody, then re-established himself in Guatemala. In March 2025, Guatemalan authorities transferred him to U.S. custody for extradition to Washington, D.C., where he faces a racketeering conspiracy case that frames him as a transnational conduit between prison leadership and street crews. If convicted on the top charges, he could face a de facto life sentence. As with all defendants, he has pleaded not guilty and remains presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. A one-time Los Angeles-based MS-13 member who rose into the gang's top command, Jandres Parada, served on the National, MS-13's Transnational Leadership Council. U.S. prosecutors allege he helped set strategy for thousands of members across El Salvador, Mexico, and the United States, overseeing military-style training, the procurement of military-grade weapons, and coordination with major Mexican cartels. He was indicted in December 2020 on terrorism and narco-terrorism conspiracy charges designed to target MS-13's command and control tier. After several years as a fugitive, he was arrested on March 7, 2024 at the California-Mexico border, arraigned in April 2024 in New York, and now faces up to life in prison if convicted. Within MS-13's hierarchy, he is described as a conduit between the top leadership and U.S. cliques, channeling orders and money across borders. Hugo Armando Quinteros Mineros, known inside MS-13 as Flaco de Francis, is widely described as a senior strategist on the gang's Ranfla Nacional, the leadership tier that set cross-border strategy, enforced discipline, and funneled money and weapons among cliques in El Salvador, Mexico, and U.S. cities. A federal grand jury in New York charged him in late 2020 with terrorism-related conspiracies providing and concealing material support to terrorists, terrorism transcending national boundaries, financing terrorism, and narco-terrorism alongside racketeering-style allegations that he helped coordinate green light deletions, extortion, and drug distribution. Salvadoran authorities detained him in 2021. In March 2023, a court there imposed a 14-year sentence in a separate case, and the country's high court paused extradition so he could serve that term first. As of 2025, he remains in Salvadoran custody while the U.S. indictment and arrest warrant stay active, leaving the door open to future extradition. He has pleaded not guilty when presented and, like anyone accused, is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. Jose Alberto Zamora, better known by his street name Piranha, is identified by authorities as a leader of MS-13's Fulton Locos Salvatruchas clique, a faction with ties stretching from El Salvador into U.S. hubs. Investigators characterize him as a high-impact figure who helped enforce the gang's extortion-coordinated violence and moved money and directives between local crews and decision-makers abroad. He appeared on El Salvador's list of the 100 most wanted gang members on allegations that include aggravated kidnapping, extortion, deletion, and terrorism-related conspiracies. His most recent U.S. custody stemmed from illegal re-entry, not from the underlying Salvadoran allegations. After completing that federal sentence, he was taken into immigration custody in Pennsylvania and, in August 2025, removed to El Salvador. Officials framed the transfer as a public safety win, noting that his leadership role made him a cross-border threat. Upon arrival, Salvadoran authorities booked him on their outstanding warrants. From there, he enters a system that has aggressively prosecuted MS-13 since 2022, with special courts and high-security detention for alleged gang leaders. Valmas Mejia, widely known as El Bambi, is identified in Salvadoran media as a former MS-13 leader who by 2019 was incarcerated at Santa Ana Prison northwest of San Salvador. Reporting at the time portrayed him as an ex-Mara Salvatrucha shot caller tied to the gang's typical operations in western El Salvador: extortion, territorial control, and violence against rivals and civilians, including incidents in which bystanders and minors were among the victims. While press photos and captions confirm his alias and confinement, precise charging documents, dates, and sentencing details have not been broadly published, leaving the full case chronology unclear. Jesse Perez, known on the street as Grinch, is described by investigators as the head of MS-13's Adams clique in southwest Los Angeles. Prosecutors allege he collected rent extortion payments, including on behalf of the Mexican mafia, and that he routinely armed himself while sourcing weapons for associates. Charging documents portray him as an organizer who green-lit violent confrontations with rivals and kept his crew stocked with firearms and ammunition. Perez was named in a broad 2019 crackdown that targeted dozens of MS-13 suspects in LA. He remains a fugitive, and all allegations against him have yet to be proven in court. Jorge Alberto Ramos Poison is identified with MS-13's Leeward Grand's clique in the Westlake area near downtown Los Angeles. While not described as the top shot caller, authorities say he participated in leadership meetings and ran a narcotics pipeline, moving drugs and arranging gun supplies for gang members. An indictment also accuses him of warning fellow MS-13 figures about police surveillance outside a leader's gathering. underscoring his role as both facilitator and counter-surveillance lookout. Ramos, too, was named in the 2019 operation and remains at large. He is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. Erwin Hugo Garcia Drupi is alleged to be a Pasadena-based MS-13 shot caller who helped coordinate firearms and drug trafficking for the gang's Los Angeles network. Investigators attribute to him wiretap deals for handguns and suppressors, management of an illicit cannabis grow, and discipline of members who defied orders, including threats of violence to enforce MS-13 rules. Prosecutors characterize Garcia as part of a cohort that sought to consolidate the gang's power in LA in the late 2010s. He remains a fugitive following joint LAPD-FBI sweeps. As with the others, the charges are allegations that must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in court. Hector Ilman Limos, known as Diablito, led MS-13's Flushing Queens clique and, in 2013, pleaded guilty in federal court to racketeering and deletion conspiracy charges tied to a string of brutal attacks and extortion schemes. Prosecutors cast him as a central organizer who spread death and destruction in Queens and beyond, directing crews that hunted rivals and terrorized neighborhoods. In one case, Limos fatally shot 25-year-old John Halley in Yonkers in 2007 after mistaking him for a rival. In another, he opened fire near a gang hangout in Queens and wounded a 13-year-old boy again, an alleged case of mistaken identity, underscoring how bystanders were routinely put at risk. The racketeering plea allowed the government to bundle multiple violent acts, gun offenses, and extortion into a single case that highlighted MS-13's top-down command style. Investigators built the file through cooperating witnesses, surveillance, and forensic evidence linking weapons and phones to Limos's crew. He was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Because there is no parole in the federal system, he will serve the vast majority of that term with only limited good time credit available before any post-release supervision or possible immigration proceedings. Yulan Adone Arcaga Carias, better known as El Porky, and also identified publicly as Alexander Mendoza, is widely described as MS-13's highest-ranking leader in Honduras and a principal broker of the gang's white girl, firearms, and money flows between Central America and U.S. cities. Born in 1982, he rose by coordinating shipments with allied trafficking networks, taxing local markets, and authorizing violence against rivals and suspected informants. U.S. prosecutors charged him in 2021 with racketeering, drug importation, and machine gun offenses, and he later became one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives with a reward of up to $5 million. His notoriety spiked in 2020 after an armed commando assaulted a Honduran courthouse in El Progreso to spring him from custody at jailbreak that underscored how MS-13's command tier can wield influence from inside and outside prisons. In February 2025, media reports in Colombia said he had been arrested on San Andres Island, but officials signaled that confirmation was pending. Weeks later, U.S. authorities continued to list him as a fugitive and to advertise the reward. The case portrays Arcaga Carias as a transnational organizer who bridged prison leadership in Honduras with cliques operating in the United States.
Edenison Velasquez Larin was arrested on June 7th during a traffic stop on the Ohio Turnpike. He was indicted 2 weeks later by the government, accused of trafficking drugs and ordering multiple murders on Long Island. Larin pleaded not guilty to those charges, but the judge denied him bail. His trial is expected to begin late next year or even in 2025. The arrest video has been viewed nearly 2 million times on WTOL's YouTube page. You can find more coverage of this case at WTOL.com.
Edenison Velasquez Larin, better known by his aliases Agreasor, Saturno, Tiny, or Paco, is accused of being a high-ranking leader within the Fulton Locos Salvatruchas, an MS-13 clique operating in Queens. In November 2024, federal prosecutors announced sweeping charges against top MS-13 figures across the country, and Larin was one of the central names. According to court filings, Larin allegedly personally carried out the 2016 deletion of Kenny Reyes and ordered the deletions of Eric Monge in 2020 and Oswaldo Gutierrez Medrano in 2022. The U.S. attorney described him and others as executioners, leaders who gained and maintained rank through extreme violence and targeted assassinations.
Amador-Rios, also known as Little and Pinky, is a leader of the Fulton Locos Salvatruchas clique of the MS-13 gang, a notorious transnational criminal organization. Based in Jamaica, Queens, Amador-Rios has been involved in various violent crimes, including murder, attempted murder, armed robbery, and racketeering. In May 2017, Amador-Rios ordered the murder of 16-year-old Julio Vasquez, an MS-13 member who had failed to carry out a previous order to kill another gang member and was suspected of cooperating with law enforcement. Vasquez was brutally stabbed over 30 times in Alley Pond Park, Queens. His body was discovered days later by a birdwatcher. In October 2016, Amador-Rios also ordered an attack on Luis Serrano, believed to be associated with the rival 18th Street gang. Serrano was shot in the head and left paralyzed. Amador-Rios was convicted of multiple charges, including murder in aid of racketeering, attempted murder, assault, firearms offenses, and Hobbs Act robbery. In November 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison, plus additional consecutive sentences for other crimes. These convictions highlight the violent nature of MS-13 and the ongoing efforts by law enforcement to dismantle such gangs and protect communities from their...
Just how long 30-year-old Alexis Sainez, also known as Blasty, would remain in prison, convicted of Alvarado's 15-year-old daughter as she walked home from her Brentwood school in September of 2016. He got 68 years. Prosecutors say Sainez is the leader of MS-13. Prosecutors say he's responsible for ordering and approving the killings of 8 people, 3 attempted murders, and other crimes. The prosecution says most of his victims were innocent. This year, Sainez pleaded guilty for his role in the The case prompted President Donald Trump to make several visits to Long Island during his first term in the White House. In court, Sainez apologized to the families of his victims, but none accepted it, like the father of Michael Johnson. Defense attorneys painted Sainez as remorseful, saying he was abused as a child by his father, has an IQ of only 72, and his, quote, damaged brain means he, quote, can't control his impulses. Prosecution says Sainez still managed to run the gang from inside the prison walls, saying while in federal custody, he smuggled in contraband, including 18 cell phones, marijuana, and alcohol.
In the quiet neighborhoods of Brentwood in central Islip on Long Island, New York, an invisible war was being waged. At the center of it stood Alexis Sainez, known on the streets as Blasty or Plaky, a feared and ruthless leader of the Sailors Locos Salvatruchas West Side clique, one of MS-13's most violent factions on the East Coast. Between 2016 and 2017, Sainez unleashed a wave of violence designed to cement his gang's dominance. Under his leadership, members of the Sailors clique carried out a string of brutal deletions, machete attacks, and calculated executions not only against rival gangs, but against anyone who stood in their way. The most horrifying example came in September 2016, when 2 teenage girls, Kayla Cuevas and Nisa Mickens, were savagely met their demise near their high school. The attack was ordered by Sainez himself, reportedly in retaliation for perceived disrespect and gang rivalry. Their bodies were discovered beaten and mutilated with machetes, sparking nationwide outrage and bringing MS-13 into the political spotlight. But the deletions didn't stop there. Prosecutors say Sainez personally ordered at least 8 deletions, as well as multiple attempted deletions, arson attacks, and drug distribution operations. He used proceeds from narcotics sales and extortion to fund further gang activity, buying firearms and sending money back to MS-13 leaders in El Salvador. His clique operated with militaristic precision, enforcing loyalty, executing rivals, and terrifying entire communities into silence. Federal investigators built a meticulous case over years. In July 2024, Sainez finally pleaded guilty to federal racketeering charges and admitted responsibility for the 8 deletions and other violent crimes. Then, on July 2, 2025, justice was served. A federal judge in Central Islip sentenced him to 68 years in prison. Today, Scene sits behind bars. His bloody legacy remains a grim reminder that gang warfare isn't confined to inner cities or border towns. It can erupt in the middle of suburban America.
Fugitives is in custody this morning. Francisco Javier Roman Bardales was turned over to U.S. authorities in San Diego after being arrested in Mexico. Allegedly a high-ranking leader of the M-13 criminal organization accused of taking part in drug trafficking, kidnappings, and other illegal activities.
Francisco Javier Roman Bardales, known within MS-13 circles as Veterano de Tribus, wasn't just another gang member. He was a general. A founder of MS-13's Ranfla in-laws kills, the gang's elite ruling body. Roman Bardales held a position of terrifying influence, directing a transnational criminal machine that stretched from the barrios of El Salvador to the streets of the United States. For over 2 decades, Roman Bardales reportedly orchestrated some of the gang's most violent and calculated operations. As a top-tier strategist and enforcer, he commanded cells across El Salvador, Mexico, and the U.S., maintaining tight control over weapons distribution, drug trafficking, extortion rackets, and targeted deletions. According to a federal indictment, Roman Bardales helped transform MS-13 from a loosely connected street gang into a narco-terrorist organization. The charges against him are sweeping: conspiracy to commit terrorism, material support for terrorists, international drug trafficking, alien smuggling, and racketeering. U.S. officials allege that he coordinated violence not just for profit but for power, vengeance, and gang supremacy. By early 2025, his crimes had placed him squarely in the crosshairs of American authorities. In February 2025, the FBI added Roman Bardales to its 10 most wanted list, branding him a key senior leader in MS-13's global hierarchy. He became one of the most sought-after fugitives in the Western Hemisphere. The breakthrough came just a month later. In March 2025, Mexican federal agents captured Roman Bardales in the city of Veracruz. Rather than pursue local charges, they immediately expelled him to U.S. custody. On March 18th, he was intercepted by the FBI at the San Isidro border crossing in California and transported under heavy security to New York. The very next day, Roman Bardales was arraigned in federal court on Long Island, a location symbolically chosen, as MS-13 had long tormented communities there. He now faces RICO terrorism charges and a host of violent crime indictments. While his trial is still pending, his capture marked a significant blow to MS-13's command structure, a rare case where one of the gang's most secretive leaders was actually brought into the light. Law enforcement agencies cite Roman Bardales as proof that even the highest-ranking gang bosses, those who don't pull triggers themselves, but give the orders, can be tracked down, exposed, and held accountable.
Good morning. An unusual move. The Justice Department now moving to drop charges against the man accused of being a top 3 MS-13 gang leader living here in Northern Virginia. This was someone described as taking part in violent gang activity.
FBI-led task force taking into custody 24-year-old Henry Josue Villatoro Santos. And court documents said that he was hiding in his mother's Dale City, Prince William County home at the time. Investigators also said they found firearms, ammunition, and suppressors in his bedroom. Now, we're told he entered the country illegally as a teen. He was actually charged with being an illegal alien in possession of a firearm. Not much mention of MS-13 activity in the arrest affidavit.
On the morning of March 27, 2025, federal authorities launched a high-stakes raid in Dale City, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Their target, Henry Joshua Villatoro Santos, a 24-year-old alleged MS-13 gang leader who, according to officials, ranked among the top 3 most dangerous MS-13 figures operating inside the United States. FBI agents stormed the suburban home where Santos had been living with his family. Flashbang grenades echoed through the neighborhood. Inside a small upstairs bedroom, Agents found him unarmed, hiding in a relative's room. He had reportedly been under surveillance for years, ever since entering the U.S. illegally at the age of 14. The arrest was immediately hailed as a major breakthrough. Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel called Santos a major East Coast leader of MS-13. Within hours, even President Trump took to social media to celebrate the takedown, describing it as a critical blow to the gang's American operations. But the story took a strange turn. Despite the fanfare, the charges filed against Santos were relatively limited. Illegal firearm possession, no racketeering, no deletions, no terrorism. Authorities recovered several unregistered handguns, ammunition, and MS-13 paraphernalia from his room. But there was no concrete evidence made public linking him to specific acts of violence or leadership in the gang. Then, just weeks later in April 2025, the Justice Department quietly dropped the case. The dismissal was without prejudice, meaning prosecutors could refile charges in the future. Still, it raised serious questions. Why was someone billed as one of the most dangerous gang leaders in the country released without trial? According to his defense attorney, the arrest was more political stunt than solid prosecution. Critics pointed to the lack of direct evidence presented in court, and even media outlets like the Associated Press noted that the federal filings were thin on details tying Santos to MS-13's command structure. At present, Henny Joshua Villatoro Santos remains in custody, not as a criminal defendant, but on immigration detainers, awaiting likely deportation to El Salvador. Whether he was a true mastermind or simply a scapegoat in a politically charged narrative remains unclear. But one thing is certain: the case highlights just how murky and complex gang enforcement has become. In the rush to dismantle MS-13, the line between intelligence, optics, and justice is often blurred.
From Los Angeles alleyways to Central American prison blocks and European suburbs, MS-13's leadership shows how a street gang became a durable cross-border system. Prison-based command issuing directives to local cliques, steady cash from extortion and narcotics, and violence used to brand territory and silence witnesses. Recent cases reflect a new playbook against the model racketeering and terrorism-linked indictments, coordinated extraditions, and joint operations across countries. Yet the gang adapts through burner phones, shifting alliances, and replaceable local crews. Understanding who the decision-makers are, how they communicate, and where they anchor their money and muscle from LA to the DC suburbs, San Salvador to Madrid is essential to disrupting the next generation of cliques before they regenerate.